Good morning, everyone. This is Russell Rucker, and I'm here for another Constitutional Talk. And welcome. Today I wanted to start with taxation. And I want to read to you something from George Washington's farewell address. To facilitate to them the performance of the duty is essential that you should practically bear in mind that toward the payment of debts, there must be taxes, that no tax can be devised which are more or less inconvenient or unpleasant, that the intrinsic embarrassment in separation from the selection of the probe objects, which is always a choice of difficulties, ought to be a decisive motive for candid construction of the conduct of the government in making it for the spirit of acquiescence in the measures or attaining revenue which the public exigencies may at any time dictate. Now, this is from the Messages and Papers of the Presidents. Just so you know where I'm getting that. You know, Washington's right. We have to, if we're going to pay for a government, if we're going to have a federal government, we have to have taxation. If we don't have a federal government and we split up into all states or other modes, then these other jurisdictions will have to tax us anyway. We're going to have to pay taxes one way or the other. Now, this week I got into quite an argument over the Federal Reserve and over our 16th Amendment. You know, the Federal Reserve sets up a Federal Reserve Board. The president appoints members to the board, and they're responsible primarily of helping run the government to a point that it's manageable. The idea is to avoid any more radical downturns, because capitalism does have great ups and then great downs. It runs in a cycle. But the 16th Amendment, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. Now, the last bit of that language is there because it's mentioned in other sections of the Constitution, so it kind of replaces those sections. Now, I don't want to pay income tax either. Nobody does. Nobody loves it. Nobody really wants to have property taxes. There's lots of different ways to fund the country. Recently, in the last year or so, our current president, has gone around seeking tariffs. And you can run the country on tariffs and duties like we did 150 years ago if that's what you want. But the thing is, you're going to have fewer benefits, fewer programs. You might not be able to have food stamps, for instance. You might not be able to have aid for the needy, for instance. You might have to end Social Security. You might have to end Medicare. I mean, how far down this road do we want to go? Do we want to eliminate the Department of Commerce, energy, education? I mean, we can go all the way back. And some of these departments, you can argue, weren't constitutional anyway because they aren't there by amendment. And certain departments are, like the Postal Service. The Department of War is listed. The Department of the Interior. There's lots of places that are actually mentioned in the document. But I think we're getting off a little bit in the weeds here. The idea that the government shouldn't be collecting taxes on income, and let's say we repeal the 16th. We still got to fund the government. We got to find another way, whether it's a national sales tax or some kind of wealth tax or something. There's got to be some way to do it. Now, there's a number of places in our Constitution that mention taxation. And I'll start with Section 7. This is Article 1, Section 7. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. Now, there would be no reason to give the House the ability to originate all money bills if they didn't have the power of the purse. And if we weren't going to allow them to raise funds, there would be no purpose for Section 7. Every bill which have been passed the House of Representatives and the Senate shall, before it become law, be presented to the President of the United States. And there's no reason to present something to the President to raise revenue if you aren't allowed to raise revenue. I mean, it's clearly acceptable to have taxation. We don't need massive taxation. We don't need overburdensome taxation. We don't need a 70, 90% taxation. We really don't need that. And we, like I said, we can go back and run the whole country on tariffs and duties if we're willing to eliminate great amounts of the budget. Section 8. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and the general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. So no state will get a benefit or a loss based on the taxations that they pay. It must be uniform across all, but still you have the power to collect taxes. Then we get into paragraph 2 of Section 8. To borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. See, all this has to do with money and raising money. And so I'll move on yet again. And here we get to Section 10. No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisals. Then it says, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything other than gold or silver coin a tender in payment of debts. And this is where they're getting that the Federal Reserve doesn't have the right to print money. Okay, they're talking about no state. They aren't talking about the federal government. The federal government clearly has the right of taxation. Now, in the very beginning days of our colonies, Samuel Adams' father tried to initiate a land bank, and he would give bills of credit that could be then used against the property they own in order to buy goods and services, because there was a shortage of gold and silver coinage. You had some Spanish coins, and you had the English pound, and you had sixpence and all this kind of stuff. You had the pound, and you had various modes of monies, and so clearly they didn't want just anybody printing money. And here Samuel Adams' father had found a way to do that until Parliament shut it down. In other words, King George III shut down the land bank. And this created a big problem, and which is one of the reasons why Samuel Adams was so radicalized against Parliament and against the king, was because he was constantly in court defending his family against problems that had occurred because of the land bank issuance. Now, Benjamin Franklin even printed money for the colonies at one point. And even our Continental Congress emitted millions of dollars worth of currency, continental currency, in order to help pay for the war. So this isn't anything new. This idea that they don't have a right to print money And we get rid of the Federal Reserve because it's Federal Reserve notes. If you look at your money, it used to be anyway, actually said Federal Reserve note on it, you get some of the older bills. I mean, so they think that if you get rid of the Federal Reserve, well, you'll get rid of the dollar. If you get rid of the 16th, then they can't do taxes, income taxes. Okay, fine. We as a country have to decide how we're going to fund the government and what we're going to fund. That's why we have a representative republic. That's why we elect congressmen, why we elect senators, why we elect a president to govern us, so to have somebody make these kind of decisions. I just want you to think about exactly what we're talking about when you talk about getting rid of some of what we've built. Because in order to get rid of the taxation, if we get rid of the Federal Reserve, that's fine with me. I'm in no love for either one of those. I respect the 16th Amendment because it's there. And I accept every section of our Constitution because it was passed in accordance with the amendment process. If it's the amendments. So I'll respect every one of those. That doesn't mean we can't repeal them. We can repeal all kinds of things. We can do a lot of different things if we have the political will to do so. But to eliminate great sums of taxation means you have to create vast amounts of benefits. We have to pay for a standing military. We have to pay for the Air Force and the Marines and the Navy, and the Space Force now that was created. And we do have to pay for these things. The national parks are a great treasure, but we still have to fund the department in order to keep those things going. We have monuments around that people like to visit. All those things cost money, as well as help for the poor. That all costs money. And the Social Security system, the Medicare, Medicaid, everything costs money. So where are we going to cut? If we're going to get rid of these things, where are we going to cut? We can get rid of a lot through fraud, waste, and abuse, as they always talk about. Sure. But will those cuts go far enough? And this is something that we have to discuss when we start talking about repealing the 16th or getting rid of the Federal Reserve or any of these kind of things. Now, our current president just ended the production of the penny, and that's a help because it costs darn near a nickel to make a penny. Now, what kind of sense did that make? And so there are things we can do, things we can change. But ending all taxation really isn't one of them. In order to have a federal government, as Washington said, we have to have taxation because we have to be able to fund it. I want you to think about that this week, and we'll catch you next week, on the next Constitutional Talk. Bye for now, folks. Have a good day. Have a good week.